The skies above the great city shone like silver mirrors. It was the last day of 2025, and humans from every world had come together to celebrate a year of peace after many long wars. Tall towers stretched toward the clouds, and music floated through the air. Lights blinked from every window, and it felt as if the city itself was alive and breathing. Inside the grand hall, people laughed, danced, and made toasts to the new year. The place was filled with important men and women wearing bright uniforms and long, sparkling dresses. At the center of the hall sat Queen Isabella, ruler of the United Terran Alliance. She was calm and proud, her eyes sharp and thoughtful. Many said her voice alone could stop a room, and when she smiled, her people felt safe. Tonight, however, her smile was small. Across the room, standing near the edge of the gathering, was Captain Evan Carter. He wore a simple dark uniform that showed signs of long use. His medals gleamed faintly under the warm lights, but he did not look proud or seeking praise. He stood quietly, hands behind his back, watching the people around him. Whispers passed from one noble to another as they looked his way. Carter was known as a soldier from the Europa campaigns, where human colonies had nearly fallen to ruin. His story was famous among the soldiers, but mostly ignored by the rich and powerful who had never seen battle. To them, he was an old kind of man, someone who fought with instinct rather than with advanced computers and machines. A young officer with a bright smile leaned toward his friend and said in a low voice, "That is the man they talk about. The one who won with luck and fists more than reason." His friend laughed softly. "Luck cannot build a world," she said. Their laughter carried through the air, and others joined in. Evan heard them. His face did not change. He had faced worse noise on darker nights when the ground shook and smoke choked the air. He had heard the screams of vengeance and men alike. This laughter, though small and sharp, could not wound him the same way, yet it reminded him that people were quick to forget. Queen Isabella's gaze moved to him. She noticed the stillness in his stance, the quiet strength that others mistook for pride. She had read reports of his service. She knew how he had led a broken squad through frozen storms and deserts of dust. But she also knew that the people who stood in her hall tonight had built their peace on the shoulders of people like him. When the music changed to a slow, graceful tune, pairs moved to the center floor to dance. Bright chandeliers swayed gently from the ceilings, reflecting light off glass and silver. Food was served in shining bowls and tall glasses filled with glowing drink. The Queen's advisors spoke of politics and trade, of new stations in the outer systems, and of how humanity was finally united under one rule. All the while, Captain Carter remained by the balcony doors. The cold air touched his face as he stepped outside, escaping the noise behind him. From there he could see the vast stretch of the city below, a sea of light reaching the horizon. He breathed out slowly, watching his breath vanish into the night. Inside, a few more chuckles followed his exit. Some whispered that he was bad at being social, that soldiers should learn grace now that wars were over. Others said he lived too much in the past. But not everyone joined in the laughter. Lieutenant Nora Briggs, an engineer who had once served under him, stood near the table with a quiet look of anger. She remembered what he had done for her, and for the others, on that frozen moon. She remembered his calm during chaos, his way of keeping everyone alive when hope was nearly gone. She wanted to speak, to stop their cruel amusement, but she held her tongue out of respect for him. She knew he would not want her to fight his battles in a room of peace. As the night went on, the Queen listened to the soft voices around her and their proud speeches about the future. Still, her mind returned to the lonely figure on the balcony. There was something in his silence that bothered her. She saw no arrogance in his eyes, only weariness and patience. She saw a man who did not need to prove himself, but whom others would never understand. The celebration continued until midnight. Cheers rose for the coming new year. Fireworks flashed outside and the sky filled with shifting colors. Yet the Queen watched Evan Carter stand still under the light, looking not at the fireworks but at the stars beyond them. In that quiet moment, as the laughter of the court echoed behind her, Queen Isabella knew that the story of the human soldier was far from finished. And those who mocked him tonight would one day learn just how deep human courage could reach beyond pain, beyond pride, and into the endless silence of the stars. On the first morning of the new year, Captain Evan Carter woke to the faint sound of distant bells. The great celebration was over, and the royal city outside his window was slowly coming back to life. The bright lights of the night had faded, and soft snow now fell over the streets below. From the high window of his quarters in the royal barracks, he could see the people clearing the roads and the vendors setting up stalls. For them, it was just another day. For him, it was another reminder that peace was still fragile. Evan poured himself a cup of black coffee and sat by the window. His reflection looked older than he remembered. The uniform folded neatly beside him felt heavier with each passing year. The faces of the men and women he had lost followed him in every quiet moment, and though the world now celebrated peace, his mind could not escape the echoes of war. The door opened softly, and Lieutenant Nora Briggs stepped inside. She had her short brown hair tied back and wore the neat uniform of the engineering corps. She smiled when she saw him, but her eyes carried the same quiet tiredness as his. "You missed the last of the celebration, Captain," she said as she placed a folder on his table. "Celebrations are not for soldiers like me," he replied. "They are for those who no longer have to fight." She nodded and sat across from him. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The silence between them was not awkward. It was the kind that came from shared understanding. They had both seen things that people in the city halls could never imagine. Nora broke the silence. "They mocked you last night," she said slowly. "They think courage belongs to the past." Evan's mouth curved in a faint smile. "If they wish to mock, let them. It is better than pity, but it isn't right," she said firmly. "You saved so many lives, and now these people treat you like some old story. They talk about perfect peace, but forget who gave them the chance to dream of it." Evan stared at his coffee. The world moves fast. People want to forget the pain that built their comfort. They will remember again when they need to. At that moment, a soft chime rang from the wall panel. A message illuminated on the screen carrying the royal seal. It was a summons from Queen Isabella herself. "You've been called to the palace," Nora said, reading the light from the screen. Evan stood, straightening his coat. "Then I should not make the queen wait." The royal palace stood tall above the city, its marble steps glowing under the pale sunlight. Guards saluted as he walked past them, and attendants whispered as his boots echoed through the halls. He followed the attendant through long corridors until he reached a quiet room filled with large windows and stacks of old paper books. Queen Isabella stood near the window, her crown light and simple, her expression calm as she watched the snow fall beyond the glass. She turned as he entered. "Captain Carter," she said softly, "you looked very still last night." Evan bowed his head. "Your Majesty, I did not wish to trouble the gathering." She smiled faintly. "You did not trouble it, but you reminded me. Peace makes people forget too easily. I have been reading your reports from Europa." Evan paused. "Those were difficult years, Your Majesty. You stayed behind to protect civilians when the walls collapsed," she said. "The others called it foolish bravery. I call it duty." She studied him for a moment. "You risked everything, yet you speak of it as if it were nothing." "It is not nothing, but it is finished," he answered. The queen walked closer. "Those who live far from danger start to laugh at the ones who stood in it. But I did not forget. I have a new task for you, Captain. Something quiet but important." She handed him a sealed message. It bore the royal mark in a short line in her handwriting. *, proceed to lunar base. 1. Observe the new fleet trials. Report in person. *, Evan took the envelope. "I will carry out your orders." Her eyes softened. "You still believe in duty when others have grown tired of it. That is rare now." Evan bowed once more. "It is all I know, Your Majesty." When he left the palace, the snow had stopped. The streets shimmered with morning light. People were smiling, holding hands, and watching the sky. He walked among them quietly, unnoticed, just another face in the crowd. As he passed through the gates of the transport station, he saw Nora waiting beside the small shuttle. She saluted with a grin. "I heard we're going to the moon, Captain." Evan nodded. "Seems like it. A new year, a new duty." She smiled. "Then let's make them remember what a human soldier can do." As the shuttle lifted from the ground, Evan looked back once at the shining city. He wondered if those who mocked him last night would ever understand what true peace costs. Then the city fell away behind him, and the wide dark sky opened ahead, waiting for what came next. The shuttle ride to the moon was quiet except for the low hum of the engines. Captain Evan Carter sat near the small window while Lieutenant Nora Briggs watched the readings on her screen. The stars outside looked calm, distant, and endless. They had flown this route many times in the old days, but this time it felt different. The war was over. There were no enemy signals, no alarms, no hidden fears. Yet something inside Evan felt uneasy, as if peace itself was too silent. When the shuttle touched down on Lunar Base 1, the air inside the docking hall smelled of clean metal and machine oil. Workers in gray suits moved between shiny new ships, checking panels and controls. The base had been rebuilt into a training center and testing field for the new defense fleet. Where once there had been battle-scarred tunnels and damaged halls, now there were bright lights and polished floors. Nora looked around with open curiosity. "They've changed everything. Feels like a different world," she said. Evan nodded. "The same ground, just new paint." A tall officer walked up to greet them. His uniform was neat, his voice polite but cold. "Captain Carter, Lieutenant Briggs. Welcome to Lunar Base 1. I am Commander Lewis Grant. The Queen informed me you would be joining us." Evan shook his hand. "We are here to observe the trials." "Of course," Grant said with a tight smile. "These are not like the battles of your youth, Captain. Everything now runs through the command link system. Strategy has become a science." Nora exchanged a quick look with Evan, but said nothing. Grant led them through the base. Huge screens showed live simulations of the fleet exercises, where unmanned ships moved in perfect patterns directed by artificial networks. The new officers sat behind glass walls, speaking calm commands to the systems that did most of the fighting for them. They looked proud and confident. Grant stopped in front of a large command room. "The Queen requested that we include you in today's demonstrations," he said politely, though his tone carried quiet amusement. "We will see how human instinct performs in this new age of reason." A few young officers nearby laughed quietly. One whispered, "The old hero versus the machines." Evan did not react. He only looked at the holographic display forming before him, a full battlefield projection. Every ship and unit glowing blue on the grid. The voice of the control system said clearly, "Captain Carter will command Simulation Team B. Commander Grant will command Simulation Team A." Grant smiled. "Let us see what the old ways can still do." Evan simply nodded and took the seat at the center of the dark room. Nora stood beside him as the lights dimmed. The simulation began. Dozens of white dots representing ships appeared across the screen, moving like sparks across an ocean of black. Grant's ships moved swiftly and cleanly, each movement measured by perfect timing. Evan's smaller group looked unbalanced in comparison. "Begin combat," said the system voice. Almost immediately, Grant gained ground. The officers clapped quietly as the machines executed every move with exact precision. But as minutes passed, Evan began doing something unusual. Instead of matching speed, he slowed his fleet, letting the system think he had lost control. When the enemy ships advanced in tight formation, Evan turned one group sideways and cut power completely. Grant frowned. "He's surrendering positions," he muttered. Nora watched closely. "Wait." The system focused on Grant's fleet as it closed in for the finishing strike. At the exact moment their forward line passed the unpowered ships, Evan restarted the engines and triggered an electromagnetic pulse from the lower vessels. The whole enemy formation blinked out of control for 10 seconds, enough time for Evan's smaller fleet to surround them. When the screen flashed red, the voice announced softly, "Simulation complete. Captain Carter, victory confirmed." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the systems powering down. Several officers looked stunned. Commander Grant forced a short laugh. "Well played, Captain. A charming trick, though such moves will soon be impossible once updates are finalized." Evan stood slowly. "Updates will never replace judgment," the Queen's advisor, who had been watching from a higher screen, looked impressed. "The Queen will want to review these results," he said quietly. Later, in the quiet of the base hallway, Nora said, "You embarrassed him?" Evan smiled faintly. "That was not my goal, but you proved the point." Evan looked out through the glass at the dark curve of Earth far away. "The point was never to win a game," he said. "It was to remind them that machines do not care when people die. We should never forget what makes us human." That night, as he walked alone through the silent corridors of the base, the lights flickered softly above him. Somewhere deep inside, he could feel that something important was changing again. The Queen had asked him to observe, but he suspected she already knew what she was building toward. Above the moon's white dust, the earth shone like a glowing jewel. Evan Carter stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of history in his chest. He had once fought for that shining world, and now it looked peaceful. But peace built on pride was thin as glass, and he could already hear the faint sound of a crack forming. The next morning, on Lunar Base 1, began with calm light moving through the glass ceiling of the control tower. Captain Evan Carter woke early. He had not slept much. The simulation victory from the day before still played in his mind, but not with pride. Instead, it left him uneasy. The young officers had looked at him not with respect, but with hidden irritation. They had built their faith in systems that obeyed orders perfectly. A man who proved their weakness was not a welcome sight. Lieutenant Nora Briggs found him at the dock where the test ships were resting in line. She handed him a short report. "They updated all the control programs last night," she said. "Commander Grant ordered new simulations this morning. I think he wants a rematch." Evan smiled slightly. "I expected that. They plan to make you look foolish this time," she added, lowering her voice. "You embarrassed him yesterday." Evan looked out at the distant Earth hanging above the horizon. "They learned something from it. I can take the embarrassment." He turned to her. "But I wonder if they truly want to learn, or only to win." By midday, the large hall of the base filled with officers, engineers, and guests who had arrived from the central city. Huge screens hung on every wall. People whispered with excitement. Some smiled at Carter. Others rolled their eyes quietly. Commander Grant stood beside the main platform, his voice confident as he spoke to the crowd. "We will now witness how man and machine must work together. Today's test will use the new adaptive system, which no human has yet defeated. Captain Carter has kindly agreed to face it." There were polite claps, but also faint laughter. Evan stepped forward without a trace of emotion. He sat in the command seat, calm and focused. Nora took her usual place beside him as support officer. The lights dimmed and the map unfolded before them. The simulated battlefield sparkled across the screen, far larger than before. Stretching across the lunar Sector 7, Grant smiled as the system voice announced, "Begin." At once, the adaptive fleets moved like a storm. They adjusted perfectly to every signal, every motion. It was like fighting a living thing. For minutes, Evan said nothing. His side was pushed back again and again. Murmurs rose among the spectators. Someone whispered, "See? The old soldier has finally met his match." Nora studied him. "They're closing in. The border ships are falling apart." "I know," he said. "Let them think I am losing." Her eyes widened as she began to understand. He slowly spread his ships outward, giving up the center ground completely. The program read the move and sent all forces forward to trap him. The system predicted an easy win. But when the enemy reached the empty center, Carter gave one short command. The small, scattered ships that had seemed lost now turned inward. They came together at precise points, circling the enemy fleet. Evan had been drawing them into a hollow circle. The system tried to adapt, but it was too late. The screen flashed and half of the enemy formations vanished. The hall fell silent. Then the voice of the system announced, "Captain Carter, victory confirmed." This time no one laughed. Even the ones who had mocked him before watched in disbelief. The same code that had been called perfect had just been broken by a man in his simple plan. Evan stood slowly. Machines follow their path until their path ends. People find another. The Queen's message arrived an hour later, carried by her advisor through the private channel. The advisor's face appeared on the main screen. "Her Majesty has seen the results. She has ordered all commanders to gather tomorrow in the Grand Forum on Earth. Captain Carter, you are to attend." As the message ended, Commander Grant approached with a forced smile. "Congratulations, Captain. It seems the Queen is quite interested in you. Though I still believe machines will soon outgrow us." Evan looked at him calmly. "Then we had better make sure we outgrow our pride first." He walked away before Grant could reply. That evening, as the base lights dimmed and the dome windows reflected the far blue glow of Earth, Evan and Nora sat outside near the observation deck. The air was still, and only the soft hum of power lines filled the silence. "Do you think she will praise you?" Nora asked at last. "The Queen watched everything. If she called everyone back home, it won't be for praise," Evan answered. "She doesn't waste time on pride. She must have seen something deeper in all this." He turned his gaze to the planet above. It looked peaceful from here, shining like a dream against the dark space. Yet he knew better. Peace without memory always faded. Someone had to remind them what courage truly meant, and why sacrifice could not be replaced by perfect systems or easy victories. Nora watched him quietly. "You'll speak before the Queen and the whole council tomorrow. But listen this time. They will hear," he said.
Listening is another matter.
The two stayed there, side by side, as silence wrapped around them. The stars above flickered in the still sky, distant but steady. And though the night on the moon was long, Evan Carter felt that something much greater was waiting for him on Earth, the truth the Queen was about to reveal, and the lesson she wanted the world to remember. The next day was bright and calm on Earth. The city that surrounded the Grand Forum glimmered under the light of the rising sun. Roads were clean, tall buildings stood in long rows, and banners of the United Terran Alliance waved gently in the wind. People filled the streets, waiting to see the event that had been announced overnight by the royal voice. The Queen herself was going to address the people, along with all senior commanders of the Defense Force. Captain Evan Carter arrived early with Lieutenant Nora Briggs. They stepped out from the royal transport into the large open square. Around them stood tall statues of men and women who had fought in older wars. Evan paused for a moment before one statue whose face looked weary and strong. It reminded him of a friend long gone. Inside the grand hall, every seat was filled. The officers who had once mocked him were there too, sitting in the front rows, their expressions mixed with nervous respect. Commander Grant sat stiffly, avoiding Evan's eyes. The vast chamber was filled with the soft whisper of voices that stopped when the royal guard entered. Trumpets sounded once, and then silence fell. Queen Isabella appeared on the balcony above. She wore a white robe with silver threads, a symbol of peace rather than power. Her calm face glowed in the golden light that poured in from the high windows. She spoke quietly at first, but her voice carried through the whole hall. "My people," she said, "for a long time we have worked to build a world without fear and without war. We have turned to technology to protect us and to guide us. We believed that perfect systems would make humans perfect as well. Yesterday we saw proof that we were wrong." A soft murmur passed through the crowd. The Queen raised her hand to calm them and continued. "Yesterday, on Lunar Base 1, a simple man of duty defeated the smartest program we have ever built. Many of you saw it as a contest of man and machine, but it was not that. It was a reminder that we are guided not only by logic, but by something greater, by heart, courage, and the will to stand, even when no rule tells us how." Evan stood quietly at the side of the hall, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not move or speak. Nora watched him with pride, though she could see he felt uneasy being praised. Queen Isabella stepped down from the balcony and walked slowly toward the stage. Her guards followed at a distance, but she stopped at the center platform and looked out across the hall. "Bring Captain Carter forward," she said. Evan walked up the long steps. Every eye followed him. He could feel the same people who once laughed now holding their breath. When he reached the Queen, he bowed deeply. She turned to the crowd and said, "This man was mocked on the last day of the old year. They called him outdated. He said that human instinct was no match for design. But when the time came, he showed what they had forgotten, the simple truth that courage cannot be written into a code." She faced him with kind eyes and added, "Captain Carter, on behalf of every citizen of the United Terran Alliance, I thank you. Not for winning a test, but for reminding us that our strength does not come from machines. It comes from people like you who choose honor when no one is watching." The hall filled with quiet clapping that grew and grew until it thundered against the marble walls. Grant and the other officers finally joined in. Evan bowed again but said nothing. The Queen reached out and placed a silver crest on his chest. It was the symbol of the Defender of Humanity, an old title long forgotten. "May this remind all who see it," she said, "that peace is protected not by walls or weapons, but by those who remember why peace matters." When the ceremony ended, the Queen invited him to walk beside her through the garden behind the hall. Tall trees swayed gently in the breeze. The scent of new blossoms filled the air. She said softly, "You changed their hearts today, not through anger, but through example. That is the hardest victory of all." Evan looked at the tall towers beyond the trees. "Many of them will forget again, Majesty. It is the way of our kind. Then you will remind them again, she said with a small smile. Each generation needs someone to hold the light for a moment longer. He nodded, understanding. Then I will keep standing as long as I am needed. That evening, when the speeches were done and the lights of the celebration began across the city, Evan stood by the river that ran past the old statues. Ah! Children laughed in the distance. Fireworks rose into the night sky like bright flowers. Nora joined him quietly. They finally see you for who you are, she said. Evan shook his head gently. They see what they need to see. Heroes fade, but what matters is that the lesson stays. He looked at the sky where the moon hung calm and silver. Somewhere up there were the silent bases, the machines, and the stars he once fought under. Tonight they all seemed peaceful. As the fireworks burned out, the old soldier turned away from the river and walked into the light of the city, his shadow stretching long behind him. And though the world would move on, the story of his courage would remain quiet, steady, and alive in the heart of every person who learned that true valor lives not in victory, but in the will to stand when others fall silent.